To begin with, it's really good to use what's happening right now as a tool for us to progress. One of my favorite uh, analogies is the manure of our experience. And I first ran into that phrase from when I was a student of Chogyam Trungpa. And I've been out here where I live for 49 years. I came out here to get back to the land, and I have done uh, a lot of large gardening. I never did gardening to make money. It was always more subsistence, but at that time I was married, and my son was living with us, and he was growing up. And also, I was not a Buddhist, and we would raise animals for meat. And we had a lot of horses. And as a result, we had a lot of manure. And so this really resonates with me, the manure of our experience. Manure stinks, but it's really nutritious and valuable for plants. And of course, I even had a manure spreader and would then spend a lot of time filling it up and then spreading it on the fields to help the plants, the crop that I was growing, grow better. And so if we look at all the difficulties that we run into life as an opportunity to grow, to learn, to develop, uh, it's a much more productive attitude than looking at what we experience as crap. And I think all of us know what that's like, and it's an easy trap to fall into. So, on that note, the next thing that I want to mention is that what is very obvious to us with this pandemic is that our secure, orderly world is falling apart day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. You could look at it as a slow speed crash of our fantasy world running into the stone wall of emptiness. Now, the problem with that analogy is that things aren't solid. If you can think of a better analogy for that stone wall, when it comes time for the Q&A, please let me know about that, and I will substitute it in the future. So things aren't solid. Things are constantly subject to change. They only exist in dependence on other things, which only exist in dependence on other things. That if you really look at it, and this is what the Buddha taught, is that we live in a world that is like a house of cards. You take one card away and the whole thing can come down on us. And so what this means is that things aren't working. And of course, the samsaric answer to that is, well, we just have to do more of the same thing. And keep putting more and more of the same thing into it, and eventually things will work out. Well, they're not working out. And even if we go back to what is called a normal existence, we are left with the realization that we live in a house of cards and it could collapse again at any time. This shows us that our ordinary refuges are not true refuges. Doctors don't save lives, they prolong life. Governments don't save lives, they prolong life. Really, either doctors or both doctors and governments, they can do a lot of things to make us comfortable, more comfortable, but we still die. There's nothing that can be done to keep us from dying. And understanding this wakes us up. It gets our attention, the present situation. It brings us closer to reality. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche would say that one meaning of the Dharma is to straighten or to heal. And the idea of straightening, I once used the analogy of an alignment to your car, to align your front and rear wheels of your car to the frame of the car. And practice does that. It aligns us closer to reality. And in a talk that I gave that analogy, there was a man that came with a bright orange vest with the reflective tape on it in the appropriate places. And when it came time for questions and answers, he said, I run an auto shop, and I can really understand that alignment part of it. And so think about this, that realizing the inadequacy of going to the government, going to doctors, going to all kinds of different places for refuge in samsara, don't work. And only the Dharma really does work as a source of refuge. So I'm going to go down the four ordinary foundations. In future talks, I will spend a talk on each one of these. But the first is the precious human birth. And that is that we are all very, very, very fortunate. We have human births, and it is in the human realm where we can attain enlightenment most quickly. We can come in contact with the Dharma, and we've come in contact with excellent Dharma teachings. We have the Karmapa as our main teacher. And it would be difficult to find a better teacher than Karmapa. He is considered as a living Buddha. And we are interested in the Dharma, or you wouldn't be on this Zoom call. And I think most of you have practiced. So we are all very, very, very fortunate. And we have at least some faith and some confidence in the Dharma. So all of these things put us in a very good place to work with the pandemic. And again, the important thing, and I'm going to talk about refuge a little bit further on, is that we're talking about refuge not only while we are alive in this body, but refuge in the future, in future lives, and so forth. Refuge until we actually attain enlightenment and Buddhahood ourselves. So precious human birth is really important. And it's good to feel good about this, to feel, you might say, a sense of relief that you have this So then the next, of course, is impermanence. And this really brings impermanence home, that we could die at any moment, that our plans, our well thought out fantasies, that we don't know what will happen. In a way, it's frequently we are in denial that we could die at any time. It's just too unsettling. And we think that things will go smoothly for us or go smoothly for the people around us. And this pandemic brings that uh, to the point where you really can't deny it, that things could end at any moment. You could die at any moment. And probably you're not going to die from COVID 19. It's really not very likely. But what brought me to the Dharma was when my best friend was killed in a horrible accident in a town of about 10,000 people, not far from here. And he was 42, very alive and vibrant, a zest for life, a nice person. And he was still killed, basically instantly. And that really was a wake up call for me, because I realized it could have been me, that accidents happen and we are not immune from them. And 2 years later, I found myself practicing Buddhism. And 2 years after that, I was out at KTD for the 10-day teaching, the first 10-day teaching. And when I got there in the office, they told me to call this number. And I called that number, and it was a friend of mine and another friend out here was killed in an accident. And that was in July 89. And then in October of 89, a third friend out here died in an accident. What I did before I entered the 3-year retreat, I made out a will, and I chose a Dharma friend of mine to be the one that would carry it out. And 2 years into the retreat, he died of Lou Gehrig's disease. And on and on and on. There was another man that older man that lived with my first meditation instructor. When I came back from retreat, they were together. And she came down one day to his office in her house. He was working on his will in his computer, and his heart had stopped. He was slumped over the computer dead. That, unfortunately, this is the situation that we live in. So impermanence is always there. It's also good to remember that whatever we are experiencing, good or bad, is impermanent too. So this pandemic is impermanent and it will pass. The third of these four ordinary foundations is to contemplate karma, that our negative actions, our harmful actions, actions that harm ourselves and harm other people or harm other people, will plant seeds that later on will sprout, grow, and bear fruit. And the fruit is suffering and unhappiness. And actions that are beneficial to ourselves and other people will bear fruit of pleasant circumstances and happiness. So what's happening in the world is this is what's called group karma. But as pandemics work, Some people within the groups are more susceptible because of their individual karma to the disease than other people. And then the fourth contemplation is what's called the unsatisfactory state of samsara. And I have in here two words, very simple. This sucks. This is not pleasant. This is unavoidable. We can't escape it. And so it's important to remember that no matter how comfortable we become in the future, lurking under the surface is suffering, no matter what we try to do. And it's so easy to go into the denial phase of operation, and it's denial is ignorance. At the prison, I saw a bumper sticker on one of the staff's cars, and I suspect it was a social worker, and the bumper sticker said, "Denial is not a river in Egypt." That we need to look inside and see if we are in denial in some way or another. It's much easier to see other people when they are in denial, but it's much better if we see ourselves and see our denial. So, what we are really going to find is when we look inside and uncover what we are denying, the truth of suffering, that birth, old age, sickness, and death are full of suffering. And of course, what it is mental suffering. If we're not aware of suffering, we're not suffering. It is our mind that suffers, not our body. And there are lots of other forms of suffering that the Buddha talked about. I'm not going to go into them in great detail. Again, I'll save this for a future talk. But just remember that no matter where we are in the human realm or any other realm of samsara, we cannot escape suffering. So, this pandemic gives us an opportunity to go in new directions and to progress on the path. Again, it's showing that things aren't working. I need to change. I need to go in a new direction. And if you look at this as the manure of our experience, then you can use it as an opportunity. First of all, an opportunity to contemplate the teachings in more depth and apply the teachings. And if you look back, it's easy to see that maybe I didn't appreciate what I had as much as I could have. The less chaos, the predictability, the comfort, but it was illusory. That what I used to complain about might not look so big anymore. And it gives us a little bit of an opportunity to develop wisdom and see that much of what we get emotional about are really not that important. As for compassion, the world is full of people that are suffering, whether it be when you're in the grocery store shopping and see people that are panic buying, read the news, and so on and so forth. People are really um, full of fear and anxiety, and they don't have the Dharma to help them. Actually, at this time, any kind of a spiritual footing can help, but this helps us develop wisdom in terms of seeing what's important and what isn't, and developing compassion and seeing the tremendous amount of suffering out there. Praise and blame are worldly activities. So blaming people, leaders, for instance, for what we're experiencing now won't solve the problem. It won't help you. And so it's really important to be more in the present and do what you can in the present. A good example would be if you are in an accident in your car with another car. What would you rather do? Stay there and get to know the driver. Why did you run into me? What's wrong with you? Were you drinking? And what's your history of DWIs and so forth? Or do you want to get in the ambulance and go to the hospital and get care? That it's important for us to be in the present and do what we can in the present so that in the future we're in a better place. Because it is in the present that determines where we will be in the future. And there's a lot of misinformation and what I say, far out cures and so on and so forth. KTD says follow the CDC guidelines, which are on the internet. I got a very wonderful email from my Lyme doctor, who's a student of Trangu Rinpoche, and he had some additional advice to the CDC. And so do what the experts recommend. I had a call from a cousin of mine the other day who was really worried about me. And so he gave me some advice about what supplements to take and so forth. And well, he was trying to control his worry by controlling other people. And it wasn't what the CDC said or any other expert said. And I've gotten other messages about things that if you Google it on the internet, you'll find that most people don't agree with. So be careful. And of course, obviously, obey the law. If they say to self-isolate, self-isolate. And finally, take refuge in the three jewels and deepen your commitment to refuge in the three jewels and realize that they are the only ones that can give you complete refuge. So now I am going to go through things here in a little different way. To get through this in the best possible way, our mindset is important. That this is an opportunity. It's actually a wonderful opportunity for transforming fear and anxiety as a support for practice. That our practice goes, our minds go up and down throughout the day. And it's a bit like the stock market. And lately our minds have been going down rather than up. maybe the anxiety level goes up, but the way we feel about the world and ourselves is going down. And so this is a wonderful opportunity to let go. If your mind is getting more and more wild, that's an indication that you need to do more shamatha meditation to practice letting go. It's a powerful practice if you do it correctly. It is not done so that you can attain a state of impervious tranquility or become blissed out or be totally engulfed in peace. This is just getting attached to bliss and so forth. The idea is to be able to let go of even blissful feelings as well as the fearful feelings. Whatever arises in our mind, we, if doing the practice properly, will let go of. And this is what we need to do, is to let go of our thoughts, our feelings, our fear, our hope, and so forth. And you might say, step out into this groundlessness where we don't need to hold on to thoughts and emotions and so forth. And really, I say this over and over again, the best indication of our shamatha practice going well is not what happens when we're meditating. What happens with our mind when we're not meditating. Is it more stable than before you had a regular meditation practice? And I'm not talking about an hour after you meditate. I'm talking a month after you've meditated every day. These sorts of things, long term, because in the short term, our mind is always going to be going up and down. The way to look for an improvement in shamatha is the difference after a time of practicing. You're working with your mental muscle. And so if you are doing physical exercise, it takes a while before that muscle strengthens enough for you to know the difference, the improvement. And it's that way with our mind. And if your mind isn't becoming less stable, then you definitely need to talk to a meditation instructor about what's going on. So we don't do shamatha meditation to attain an altered state of mind. The Buddha said we're already in an altered state of mind. And what we do when we meditate is we are leaning towards and going towards an unaltered state of mind, a state of mind that is unaltered by thoughts, emotions, fear, hope, and so forth. The next thing is to accept the situation. This is what we're working with. Um, Lower your standards of what is acceptable. This is acceptable. We can't fight it. Don't give up. If you give up, you can't do anything. You become hopeless, helpless, powerless, and so forth. It's depressed. It's not healthy to give up and feel you can't do anything about it. So use your knowledge, your wisdom, your skill, your love, and your compassion. Be kind to yourself, be kind to other people. It's really important when you're going out in the world, or even when you're on the internet and you're ordering on the internet, to realize there are real people that are at work so that you can order online, that you can go to the store and buy these goods. There are people at work so that we have electricity, so that our government, local, state, and federal, is working, so that we have police and fire protection. Uh, we have 911 and can call it up at any point and go to the hospital. And the hospital is full of people that are putting their lives in danger. I like to make the comparison between them and firemen or fire people, and that a fire person will go into a burning building and pull people out to safety. And that's what, at the risk of their own life. And that's what healthcare workers are doing now. There aren't enough tests for them to know if they have caught it or not. They're at a very high risk of catching the virus, and yet they show up to work. They might be burnt out, they might be scared, and extremely overworked and so forth, yet they show up. And so think about this, of all the people out there that are doing things so that we have these things available to us that we benefit from. So gratitude, appreciation, and gratitude is really are very healthy emotions and thoughts. So take time to contemplate how fortunate you are and how many people are working that are benefiting you. And to work on compassion, I already mentioned this. Think about all the people that are out of work now, that might not have enough money to pay medical bills, buy food, take care of their family, and so forth. And even more difficult are the street people, the undocumented workers, or undocumented people in the United States that might be afraid to go for medical help because they'll get deported and so forth. So this is a wonderful opportunity to do these contemplations and include them in your practice. It's much better than spending time worrying about yourself. Mingyur Rinpoche has a short talk online, and he mentioned this: scan your body when you have anxiety. Just look at the anxiety and the way your body is reacting, and don't react, just observe it. He says that our mind is like sky and anxiety is like clouds, that the clouds come and go, the anxiety comes and goes. And so if you have a good meditation practice of shamatha meditation, you can look at the anxiety and watch it come and go. It's not solid. If it was, once you started feeling anxiety, you would feel that way until you died. And there was a time not long ago where you probably didn't have anxiety about COVID-19. Another bit of advice is be carefree, but not careless. Humor is really important. Having a light touch is really important at a time like this. When you find yourself uh, uh, obsessing about fear and what could happen and so forth, when you realize that, laugh at it. This is a silly thought. These are silly thoughts. These are silly emotions. This is a silly place to be in. I'm not going to stay here. If you then go the other direction and say, oh, I'm terrible in doing this, I'm doing this totally wrong, da 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 da, you're just pouring you're pouring more crap on crap. And if you can lighten up, you're turning it into manure. I think all of you have seen Rinpoche's, whether it be when they're teaching or it's been when they are not teaching and more relaxed. They laugh a lot. Mingyur Rinpoche laughs a lot. The Dalai Lama laughs a lot. Khenpo Karta Rinpoche would make jokes, and so on and so forth, that there's nothing wrong with humor and lightening up. And so, how do you work with anxiety, worry, and fear? The Lojong teachings have a very good practice here, and that is when you find yourself obsessing about worry, fear, and anxiety, then say, may this anxiety and fear of mind embody that of all sentient beings. May they be free of worry and anxiety. This transforms your anxiety into love. Instead of thinking about yourself, you are transforming it into love for all sentient beings. So we can do that with any emotion that we feel in these times. The same thing with anger. When you realize that you're angry, may this anger of mine embody, encompass, include all the anger of all sentient beings. May this have freed them from anger. So this is a very powerful practice. And again, it requires mindfulness of what's going on in our mind. And the mindfulness comes to a good sitting meditation practice of shamatha. So to go on, there are lots of different practices that we can do. And shamatha, and then these Tonglen practices of love and contemplating compassion and so forth, they all help each other. It's good to do a lot of things. It's good to do prayers and aspiration prayers, and then dedicate the merit of anything that we do, our practice. And when we're done with this talk, we'll dedicate the merit. And we're dedicating the merit to all beings that they may enjoy the fruit of this virtuous activity. Now, the next is obvious. I got a message from Khenpo Tenkyong this morning, and it was spend more time practicing. Use this as an opportunity to do retreat type practice. So you have more free time. Don't spend it on Netflix, Facebook, and so forth. Practice, practice, practice. And let's see here. I guess finally, before I open this up to Q&A, is, and this is very, very good advice, I feel, is act like you have the virus, but you're asymptomatic, and you don't want to give it to anybody. And in actuality, the first interaction you have, close interaction with anybody, you could easily have contracted it. And so by acting this way, you are transferring it to I'm being very, very, very careful because I'm worried about myself, to I'm being very, very careful because I don't want to harm anybody else. I am doing fine, by the way. I've got a very good symptom, and that is I've got a runny nose. And what I hear is that if you have the COVID-19, you don't have a runny nose. Other than the runny nose, I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling energetic and so forth. And what I have been doing, and I recommend this, so I'm going to give you a few of my own precautions, is I'm buying more and more online. There are two grocery stores that I can buy online and then drive into a designated area, and an employee of the store will come out and put it in my car. Yesterday, there's a little Dollar General in Ridgeland. Ridgeland, for those of you who haven't been here, is 250 people. I was really shocked when they built this store, but they had senior hour between 8 and 9 o'clock yesterday and every day. And so I went in there. There were two store clerks, and there were two customers that came in at different times. And I'm not even sure if they bought anything. They weren't in there much. And I was a great distance from them. I put on surgical gloves before I even touched the door of the store. And actually, thinking about it, it was an automatic door. So it wasn't until I got in that that I touched anything with the gloves. I was able to buy paper products, including toilet paper. I was able to buy hand sanitizer and a number of other things that are supposed to be in short supply. If you're short of these, come to Ridgeland. And so I am trying to behave in a way that is safe for myself and safe for other people. When you wash your hands for the recommended 20 seconds, a really good technique is to say the Vajrasattva mantra. It takes about 20 seconds to say it. And take care of your mind. That's even more important than taking care of your body.